you, like me, must feel very happy that there's not an army of police here about to shift us all over.
Indeed. But it was very interesting what you said about Melbourne and your feeling of it being a place that you can live. I mean, and that analysis has come up from other people in the past. And yeah, the contributions of the different communities, in my experience, it has been a place which welcomes contributions in ways in which, by hearsay, Sydney doesn't. I mean, it seems to be a place which much more tribal and polarised. But yeah.
Part of my analysis of the difference between Sydney and Melbourne also has to do with, I personally believe that Sydney is as brutal and as racist as it is, in part because of the difference in football cultures between the two cities, you know. So, can I chuck football into the equation here?
Of course you can. Actually, I just encountered a wonderful thing invented by a visiting artist, who observed the Australian rules football at action and then invented a game in which 3 teams play. So you get three sets of posts and three teams playing at the same time. And with my interest in tripolarity and the way in which that seems to be what supports intellectual change whenever it takes place, is when you get 3 very strong positions being argued for, it was absolutely fascinating to see this attempt to create a version of Australian rules with 3 teams playing at once. And they got 3 teams to play, and after a while it looked as if it was a contest between 2 who started concentrating on each other, and the 3rd team, who were not being looked at, started getting hold of the goals and came close to winning. So and I began to think too that much as what you spoke about there is that sport as something is really important. If you see Brian Cox talking about the human universe, and again he uses cricket as the simile. I mean, there are these rules, the rules of physics, and then these unpredictable things happen within them. So maybe you're right in pointing out that maybe Naomi, we didn't have enough sport in the pavilion.
Brian Cox into the equation too. That's pretty good going. We've covered a lot of territory here. So what's your final word on this?
Well, I mean, the whole reason that I'm interested in architecture is that it touches so many different realms of interest. So it seeps into literature, into poetry, into song, into music, into everything. It's omnivorous. It consumes everything. And then in very difficult moments, it tries to crystallize that into something which simply stands there inert and is about all of those investigations in some obscure way and can be invaded and become part of other conversations. So yes, I mean, I think it's a pity that Sean wasn't here, because to hear your critique of some of the language he uses, because I do think that we have to be very careful with the language that we use. And be very cautious about the descriptions that we make. I thought that was a very telling moment in your observations.
But not to the extent that people should feel restricted and inhibited, I think. I mean, I sort of pointed that out in terms of Sean's architect's statement, not to be critical or have a go at him. It was just an interesting thing that I observed when I sort of was trying to figure out what my place in this event here today might be. I mean, I was a bit perplexed, because it's a bit outside of my square. I mean, I wish I had become an architect when I was young, then perhaps I'd be here for a different reason or in a different way. But
and then maybe my last interest is, I mean, what do you think of the attempts that various architects have made to come up with something that might be described as an Aboriginal architecture?
I've observed a variety of attempts to do that over the years. I'm not all that sure I've seen too many successful attempts. I think, I don't think I can single out any particular thing. Maybe Brambuck up in the Grampians,
Yep.
Garywood.
Yeah.
I suppose because I never became an architect, and I lost. When I drifted off into politics and history 40 years ago, I sort of lost my passion a bit for it, I suppose. So I'm not sure. I don't think that I can cite what I might regard as a successful attempt at that. It's a difficult and vexed issue for me, I suppose. I don't know.
And I mean, it's perhaps anyway a mistake to think that you can freeze some piece of culture into a work of architecture which represents something for all time. I mean, everything accumulates associations and begins as one thing and then enters into other stories and becomes part of another thing.
And Aboriginal Australia is incredibly diverse in itself as well, and is in a constant state of change as well anyway. People make the mistake sometimes of sort of thinking of us in an essentialist sort of a way, which is a serious mistake, because you can't really talk about the Aboriginal experience or the Aboriginal opinion now. There's 500 different mobs in Australia, and coming from a multitude of different circumstances, different climates, different everything, So.
And in a way that's brings me back to pavilions, because I mean the whole history of pavilions, although they're always fairly small, they're always a little bit toy-like, they always are the sorts of things you feel that you might be able to carry away in the palm of your hand, but that history is about an attempt to express different kinds of ideas about what matters in life, and it's a very long history. And sometimes these things are nationalist, sometimes they're spiritual, sometimes they're musical. So even to think of the pavilion as a fixed thing is probably also a mistake.
Well, a good example of that, I suppose, is the exhibition building up in Carlton Gardens, which began as a temporary thing and began for a different purpose, but then as time went on, it became the site of the creation of the White Australia policy, and has evolved even since then into a different sort of thing now.
Yeah.
So, just thought I'd chuck that in, folks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all. Thank you. That was terrific.